The sound of a baby's cry crackled through the cheap baby monitor as Sofia Martinez hastily pinned her name tag to her hotel uniform. 6 months old, and already with lungs that could wake the dead, little Mateo was finally settling down in Mrs. Hernandez's arms. The elderly neighbor had become Sofia's lifeline since her husband Diego's construction accident 8 months ago, while Sofia was still pregnant. "I'll be back by 4, Mrs. Hernandez," Sofia called, grabbing her bag and the last can of formula from the nearly empty kitchen cabinet. "There's enough for his morning bottle, but I'll bring more tonight." Her stomach knotted at the sight of that single can. 3 more days until payday, and formula wasn't something she could stretch like her own meals. Sofia rushed out of the cramped one-bedroom apartment that had once felt like a palace when they'd first married. The Golden Palm Hotel loomed 15 blocks away, its gleaming 60-story facade a stark contrast to her neighborhood's weathered buildings. She'd been lucky to land the housekeeping job 3 months ago when the medical bills began to overwhelm them. Diego was still undergoing physical therapy, determined to return to work, but his progress was agonizingly slow. The hotel's employee entrance swallowed her into a world of luxury she only ever experienced with a vacuum cleaner in hand. Sofia slipped into the staff room, where her supervisor Marta was already distributing assignment sheets. "Floors 45 through 50 today, Sofia," Marta said, handing her a clipboard. "The investors' conference has the premium suites booked solid. Be extra thorough." Sofia nodded, scanning the list of rooms. Her eyes caught on one notation: Room 501, VIP guest ultra-premium service, the penthouse suite. Tips from rooms like these could mean extra formula for Mateo, perhaps even enough to start rebuilding their emergency fund. The service elevator hummed as it climbed to the top floors, where a single night's stay cost more than Sofia's monthly rent. She pushed her cart down plush, carpeted hallways, systematically working through her assignments with practiced efficiency. By noon, she'd completed 3 rooms, collecting modest tips from each. As Sofia approached room 501, she noticed the "Do Not Disturb" sign had been removed. She knocked gently, calling "Housekeeping," before using her keycard. When no one answered, she entered, immediately stunned by the opulence before her. The penthouse suite sprawled across the entire east wing of the floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. Sofia had cleaned luxury suites before, but this one outshone them all. A bottle of champagne worth more than her weekly salary sat half empty on a marble countertop. Men's clothing, designer suits and casual wear that screamed money were scattered across the bedroom. She set to work, moving efficiently through the space. In the bathroom, she found an array of high-end toiletries and a gold watch carelessly left beside the sink. Sofia carefully arranged it on the vanity, making sure it was prominently visible. The world of such careless wealth was foreign to her. Diego had saved for months to buy her a simple silver necklace for their anniversary last year. While changing the sheets, Sofia's hand brushed against something hard beneath the pillow. A leather portfolio. She set it carefully on the nightstand, making sure not to disturb its contents. As she smoothed the premium Egyptian cotton sheets over the mattress, the suite door clicked open. "Excuse me, I'm almost finished," Sofia called, hastily gathering her cleaning supplies. The man who entered was not what she expected. Despite the expensive suit and commanding presence, he appeared younger than she'd imagined, perhaps mid-30s, with dark hair and sharp, observant eyes that immediately registered her presence. There was something familiar about him that Sofia couldn't place. "Take your time," he said, his voice carrying a slight accent she couldn't identify. He moved to the desk, apparently searching for something. "Have you seen a leather portfolio?" "Yes, sir. I placed it on the nightstand," Sofia replied, gesturing toward the bedroom. He nodded, retrieving it before settling at the desk. Sofia continued her work, acutely aware of his presence as he made a phone call. His conversation revealed snippets about acquisitions and property values, business talk that meant little to her. When she finished, Sofia quietly announced, "All done, sir." "Is there anything else you need?" He looked up, studying her for a moment. "No, thank you." As she turned to leave, he asked, "What's your name?" "Sofia, sir." "Sofia," he repeated, as if testing the name. "You did a good job. Very thorough." She smiled politely. "Thank you, sir." As she pushed her cart toward the door, the man called after her, "Wait." He approached, extending a $100 bill. "For your attention to detail." Sofia's eyes widened. This was formula money, bill money. "Thank you, sir. That's very generous." His phone rang again and he turned away to answer it. Sophia slipped out, her heart racing. With this tip, she could buy enough formula to last 2 weeks. By the end of her shift, Sophia had cleaned 6 more rooms, but none had yielded tips anywhere near what the man in 501 had given her. As she changed out of her uniform, Marta appeared at her locker. "Sophia, Mr. Reynolds in 501 specifically requested you to clean his suite for the duration of his stay, 2 weeks. Marta looked impressed. "Whatever you did, he was pleased. This is unusual." "I just did my job," Sophia replied, bewildered. "Well, keep doing it. He's one of our most important guests. They say he's here to acquire several properties downtown. Reynolds Enterprises is a global real estate empire." On her way home, Sophia stopped at the pharmacy, purchasing 3 cans of Mateo's formula. As the cashier bagged her purchase, the television above the counter showed a business news segment. She glanced up, freezing when she recognized the face on the screen, the man from room 501. Jackson Reynolds, CEO of Reynolds Enterprises, has arrived in the city for what analysts speculate could be the biggest development deal of the decade. Sophia stared at the screen, a strange feeling washing over her. The reporter continued. "Reynolds, who rarely makes public appearances, is rumored to be personally overseeing the acquisition of the Riverside District for redevelopment. The Riverside District, where her apartment building stood. The building that had recently been sold to new owners who had been vague about future plans. The knot in Sophia's stomach tightened as she left the store, her mind racing. Was it possible? Could the man whose generous tip had just bought her baby's formula be the same man who might soon demolish their home? As she climbed the stairs to her apartment, Sophia clutched the bag of formula to her chest, unaware that her chance encounter in room 501 had set in motion events that would irrevocably change her life. The billionaire had noticed her, but what she didn't know was why, and what connection bound them together long before she had ever entered his hotel suite. The following morning, Sophia arrived at the Golden Palm with butterflies in her stomach. The assignment to exclusively clean Mr. Reynolds' suite felt both like a blessing and a burden. The generous tip had solved her immediate problem, but the news segment had planted seeds of worry that took root overnight. She found Diego sitting at their small kitchen table when she woke, poring over their bills with his physical therapy exercises forgotten beside him. "We're 3 months behind on the medical payments," he'd said, not looking up. Once a confident man whose smile could light up a room, Diego now carried the weight of their financial struggles in the slump of his shoulders. "And the new building owners left notices yesterday. Rents increasing next month." Sophia had kissed the top of his head, placing the remaining cash from yesterday's tip in front of him. "We'll figure it out," she'd promised, though the path forward remained unclear. She hadn't mentioned the connection between her hotel guest and their housing situation. Diego had enough to worry about. Now, as the service elevator climbed to the 50th floor, Sophia rehearsed what she would say if she encountered Mr. Reynolds again. Should she mention the Riverside development? Ask about his intentions for the residents? The absurdity of the situation wasn't lost on her. A housekeeper confronting a billionaire about his business dealings. A Do Not Disturb sign hung on the door of Suite 501, but Marta had instructed her to call Mr. Reynolds' assistant to confirm his schedule. A woman with a clipped, efficient voice informed her that the suite could be serviced now, and Mr. Reynolds would return at noon. Relief flooded Sophia as she entered the empty suite. Sunlight streamed through the vast windows, illuminating evidence of a hastily consumed breakfast. She began her routine, cleaning with even more care than usual. In the bedroom, she noticed a framed photograph on the nightstand that hadn't been there yesterday. A woman with striking features and a serious expression, holding a young boy. As Sophia arranged the pillows, her elbow accidentally knocked the frame face down. When she picked it up, she noticed a news clipping tucked into the back of the frame. The headline read, "Riverside Community Fights Displacement, dated 15 years ago." A younger version of her father-in-law, Roberto Martinez, was quoted in the article, speaking passionately about the importance of preserving the neighborhood. Sophia's hands trembled as she carefully replaced the frame. Why would Jackson Reynolds have an old news clipping about her husband's family? The coincidence seemed too significant to ignore. The suite door opened, startling her. Jackson Reynolds entered earlier than expected, engaged in intense conversation with a man in an equally expensive suit. "The holdouts in the eastern blocks are our primary concern," the other man was saying, "particularly the Martinez property. The old man refuses to sell regardless of our offers." Sophia froze, her cleaning cloth suspended mid-air. They were talking about her father-in-law's small grocery store, the business he'd built from nothing 40 years ago, the lifeblood of their family. Reynolds noticed her presence and stopped abruptly. "We'll continue this later, Victor," he said to his companion, who nodded and left without acknowledging Sophia. An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Sophia resumed cleaning, her movements mechanical as her mind raced. Jackson Reynolds moved to the bar and poured himself a glass of water. "How long have you worked at the Golden Palm, Sophia?" he asked, his tone conversational. "3 months, sir," she replied, keeping her eyes on her task. "And before that?" Sophia hesitated. "I helped my husband with his construction business. Small projects, mostly." Reynolds nodded, studying her with unsettling intensity. "Martinez, that's your last name?" Her heart skipped a beat. "Yes, sir. Through marriage." "Any relation to Roberto Martinez? Owns a grocery store in the Riverside district?" The pretense of casual conversation evaporated. Sophia met his gaze directly, summoning her courage. "He's my father-in-law." Reynolds didn't seem surprised. "I thought so. The resemblance between your husband and Roberto is striking. I've seen photos." "Why do you have a news clipping about my family?" Sophia asked, abandoning all professional distance. A flicker of something, guilt, recognition, crossed his face before his expression became unreadable again. "Research. I make it a point to understand the communities where I invest." "You mean the communities you demolish," Sophia replied, immediately regretting her boldness. This man could have her fired with a single word. To her surprise, Reynolds didn't appear offended. "It's more complicated than that. Development brings opportunity, jobs, better infrastructure. It also displaces families who've lived there for generations, families like mine." Reynolds set down his glass. "Your father-in-law's store stands in the way of a project that would revitalize a struggling area. I've offered him twice the property's value." "That store is his legacy," Sophia said. "It's not about money." "Everything is about money, Sophia," Reynolds replied, though his tone lacked conviction. "How is your husband recovering? Diego, isn't it?" The personal question caught her off guard. "How do you know about my husband's injury?" Reynolds didn't answer directly. "Construction accidents can be devastating. Medical bills, lost income. It must be difficult." A chill ran down Sophia's spine. "Is that why you requested me specifically? To gather information about my family? To find leverage against my father-in-law?" "That's not," Reynolds began, but was interrupted by his phone. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "I need to take this. We'll continue our conversation later." Sophia finished cleaning in tense silence, while Reynolds spoke quietly in the adjacent room. When she prepared to leave, he approached her again. "Your father-in-law is meeting with my development team tomorrow," he said. "Perhaps you and Diego should join him." "Why would you want us there?" Sophia asked suspiciously. "Because this affects your future too." He reached into his wallet and handed her another $100 bill. "For your discretion regarding our conversation." Sophia stared at the money, anger bubbling inside her. "I don't want your guilt money, Mr. Reynolds." "It's not guilt," he said quietly. "It's recognition of your situation." "You don't know anything about my situation," she replied, but took the money nonetheless. Mateo needed formula, and pride wouldn't feed her child. That evening, Sophia found Diego and his father in heated discussion at the grocery store. The small neighborhood establishment had weathered economic downturns, changing demographics, and multiple redevelopment threats over 4 decades. "They're offering enough to retire comfortably, Papa," Diego was saying. "To pay off all our medical bills and start fresh." Roberto shook his head stubbornly. "This store fed our family, paid for your education. I built it for you to take over someday when you're healed." "And what about Mateo's future?" Diego countered. "What if I never fully recover? How will Sophia support our family alone?" Sophia cleared her throat, announcing her presence. Both men turned to her, their expressions a mixture of frustration and weariness. She hesitated, then shared what she'd learned about Jackson Reynolds and his connection to their family. "He specifically requested me as his housekeeper," she concluded. And he knows details about our lives that don't make sense. Roberto's eyes narrowed. Reynolds is the son of Thomas Reynolds, who tried to buy this property 15 years ago. He sent people to intimidate us when we refused to sell. The son is now following his father's footsteps, Diego said bitterly. Sophia thought about the photograph in Reynolds's suite, the woman and the young boy. Something about the story didn't add up. He wants us to attend the meeting tomorrow, she told them. He said it affects our future. That night, as Mateo slept peacefully in his crib, Sophia researched Jackson Reynolds online. Articles described him as a ruthless businessman who had expanded his father's company into a global enterprise. Yet a few pieces painted a different picture. Mentions of sustainable development initiatives, community integration programs, affordable housing units within luxury developments. One particular photograph caught her attention, a younger Jackson Reynolds shaking hands with a man who looked remarkably like Roberto. The caption read, "Reynolds congratulates scholarship recipient, 2010. Sophia stared at the screen, the pieces of the puzzle rearranging themselves in her mind. There was more to Jackson Reynolds than met the eye, and tomorrow's meeting would reveal just how deeply their lives were intertwined. The Reynolds Enterprises conference room exuded power and wealth. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a commanding view of the Riverside district, the same view that had greeted Sophia from her childhood bedroom window, though from a vastly different perspective. From this height, the neighborhood's weathered buildings and narrow streets appeared minuscule, easily erased and redrawn according to some architect's vision. Sophia sat between Diego and Roberto, acutely aware of how out of place they looked among the sleek executives in designer suits. Diego had insisted on wearing his one good dress shirt, despite the pain it caused him to button it with his still recovering hands. Roberto had brought a folder containing 40 years of meticulously kept records, the history of his store and the community it served, documented in fading receipts and newspaper clippings. When Jackson Reynolds entered, the atmosphere shifted. He nodded at his team before his eyes found Sophia's. Something unspoken passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, or a shared understanding that this meeting held significance beyond a simple business transaction. "Thank you for coming," Reynolds addressed Roberto directly. "I know you've declined previous offers, but I hope today's proposal will demonstrate our commitment to honoring your legacy while moving forward with necessary development." Victor, the man Sophia had seen in the hotel suite, began a polished presentation about revitalization and economic opportunity. Glossy renderings showed modern buildings interspersed with green spaces, a far cry from the current neighborhood. Sophia noticed Diego leaning forward with interest, despite his father's stony expression. "The centerpiece of the Eastern development will be a community marketplace," Victor continued, clicking to a slide showing an indoor market with multiple vendor stalls. "Designed to preserve the character and diversity of local businesses while providing upgraded facilities," Roberto scoffed quietly. "Pretty pictures don't guarantee survival for small businesses. We've seen this before. Rent increases push out the original owners and chain stores take their place." Reynolds interceded. "That's why we're offering long-term leases with controlled rent increases to existing business owners, including a premium corner location for Martinez Grocery, with twice the current square footage." Sophia exchanged surprised glances with Diego. This wasn't the ruthless buyout they'd expected. "And what happens to the residents?" Diego asked. "Our neighbors can't afford luxury apartments. 30% of residential units will be designated affordable housing, with current residents given first priority," Reynolds replied. "We're not interested in erasing communities, Mr. Martinez. We want to enhance them while preserving their character." Roberto remained skeptical. "Why the sudden interest in preservation? Your father certainly didn't care about our character when he tried to force us out 15 years ago." A shadow crossed Reynolds' face. "I'm not my father, Mr. Martinez." The meeting continued with detailed discussions of terms, timelines, and guarantees. Throughout, Sophia observed Jackson Reynolds closely. The calculating businessman she'd expected was present, but there were glimpses of something else, a personal investment in the outcome that seemed oddly disproportionate. As the executives filed out for a brief recess, Reynolds approached Sophia. "Could I speak with you privately?" he asked. Diego's expression hardened with suspicion, but Sophia squeezed his hand reassuringly. "It's okay," she murmured. I'll be right back. Reynolds led her to a small adjoining office, closing the door behind them. For a moment he simply stood there, seeming uncharacteristically uncertain. "You've been researching me," he stated finally. Sophia didn't deny it. "I found a photograph of you with my father-in-law from 2010. Something about a scholarship." Reynolds nodded, moving to the window. "The Roberto Martinez Community Scholarship, awarded annually to a student from the Riverside district. Why would you name a scholarship after him while simultaneously trying to buy out his business?" Reynolds turned to face her. "Because Roberto Martinez changed my life." He hesitated, then continued. "My father sent me to your neighborhood when I was 16 to gather information on the holdout properties. I was supposed to find weaknesses, pressure points. Instead, I found a community." "I don't understand," Sophia said, though a suspicion was forming in her mind. "I used a different name back then, my mother's maiden name, Jackson Reed." He watched her face carefully. "I spent that summer working at Roberto's store, learning about the neighborhood from the inside." Sophia gasped as memories suddenly realigned. "Jamie," she whispered. "You were Jamie Reed." The summer Sophia turned 15, a quiet boy had appeared in the neighborhood, taken under Roberto's wing at the grocery store. Sophia, who often helped at the store after school, had developed an instant crush on the serious, dark-haired boy who seemed so different from the others. "You remember, Reynolds," Jamie said softly. "You disappeared at the end of summer. No goodbye, nothing." The hurt in her voice surprised her. That teenage disappointment should have faded long ago. "My father discovered what I was doing, that I was feeding information to Roberto instead of gathering it for him." His expression darkened. He was furious, sent me to boarding school in Switzerland the next day. Sophia struggled to reconcile the powerful businessman before her with the shy boy who had helped her stock shelves and listened to her dreams of becoming a teacher, dreams long deferred by financial realities. The scholarship was my way of giving back. When I gained control of some family assets at 21, it was the first thing I established. Roberto never knew I was behind it. I used a foundation name. "And now you're back to finish what your father started," Sophia said, the pieces clicking into place. Reynolds shook his head. "I'm back to do it differently, to develop the area without destroying it." He paused. "When I saw your name on the hotel staff list, I couldn't believe it. Then I realized you must have married Diego. Roberto mentioned his son during that summer. So you requested me as your housekeeper out of... what? Nostalgia. Curiosity initially," he admitted. "Then concern when I learned about Diego's accident and your situation." He hesitated. "I never expected to find you cleaning hotel rooms, Sophia. You were brilliant. Headed for college. A career." Sophia bristled at his tone. "Life happens, Mr. Reynolds. Not all of us have family fortunes to fall back on. I didn't mean... My husband almost died," she continued, emotions spilling over. "Our savings disappeared into medical bills. I do what I need to do for my family, and I don't need your pity." "It's not pity," Reynolds insisted. "It's..." He stopped abruptly, reconsidering his words. "The development project is genuine, Sophia. It's been my plan for years, designed specifically to avoid the mistakes my father made. To prove that progress doesn't have to come at the expense of community." Before Sophia could respond, a knock came at the door. Victor entered, his expression tense. "Mr. Martinez is asking to leave," he reported. "Says he's heard enough empty promises." Reynolds looked alarmed. "Tell him we're coming right now." As Victor left, he turned to Sophia. "Please, ask Roberto to hear me out. The complete proposal. There's more at stake here than just the grocery store." When they returned to the conference room, the atmosphere was charged with tension. Roberto stood with his folder clutched to his chest, Diego at his side looking torn. "Roberto," Reynolds began, reverting to the familiar address of their past connection. 15 years ago, your kindness showed a confused teenager that there was more to business than profit margins. You taught me about community, about legacy." Roberto's eyes narrowed with dawning recognition. "Jamie," he whispered incredulously. Reynolds nodded. "I made a promise to myself that if I ever had the chance, I would develop this district the right way, with respect for its history and people." "Pretty words from a Reynolds," Roberto replied, though with less heat than before. "But actions matter more than intentions. Which is why I've already established this, Reynolds said, sliding a document across the table. The Riverside Heritage Trust, legally binding protections for local businesses and residents, overseen by a board composed primarily of community members. Diego leaned forward to examine the document, his expression shifting from skepticism to cautious interest. This gives the community veto power over aspects of the development, and guarantees that no current resident will be priced out, Reynolds added. It's not perfect, but it's a genuine attempt at balanced progress. As the meeting continued with this new understanding, Sophia observed the interaction between Roberto and Reynolds, the cautious reconciliation of the mentor and the boy who had once betrayed and then honored him. When Roberto finally nodded his tentative agreement to continue negotiations, Reynolds' relief was palpable. On their way out, Reynolds caught Sophia's arm gently. "There's one more thing," he said quietly. "A position I'd like to discuss with you, community liaison for the project. Full benefits, flexible hours. Your experience as both a resident and someone who understands business operations would be invaluable." Sophia stared at him, suspicion flooding back. "Is this your way of ensuring Roberto's cooperation? Buying our support?" "No," Reynolds replied firmly. "It's recognizing talent and opportunity. The same potential I saw in you 15 years ago." His voice softened. The teacher who never got to teach. Before she could respond, Diego appeared at her side, his expression questioning. Reynolds nodded politely and stepped away, leaving Sophia with a business card bearing his personal number. That night, as she rocked Mateo to sleep, Sophia stared at the card, her mind a tumult of conflicting emotions. The boy who had been her first crush had reappeared as a powerful man who held her family's future in his hands. The coincidence seemed too great, the timing too convenient. Yet the truth in Reynolds' eyes when he spoke of his debt to Roberto had seemed genuine. What she couldn't reconcile was the flutter in her chest when he had recognized the girl she once was, the ambitious, hopeful young woman with dreams beyond the neighborhood, a woman who had disappeared beneath the weight of adult responsibilities and unexpected hardships. As Mateo finally drifted to sleep, Sophia made her decision. She would accept the meeting to discuss the position, but on her terms. The boy she had known might be long gone, replaced by a billionaire with complex motives, but perhaps, just perhaps, this unexpected reconnection offered a path forward for all of them. What she didn't know as she finally fell into exhausted sleep was that Jackson Reynolds had not revealed his most significant secret, one that would turn her world upside down once more and test the fragile trust beginning to form between them. 3 weeks later, Sophia found herself in a situation she could never have imagined, sitting behind a desk in the Reynolds Enterprises Community Outreach Office, reviewing architectural plans for the Riverside development. The community liaison position had proven to be legitimate and substantial, not the symbolic role she had feared. Her input had already resulted in several modifications to the plans, preserving landmarks that held special meaning to long-time residents. The transition had been swift, but not without complications. Her resignation from the hotel had raised Marta's eyebrows, especially when she learned where Sophia was going. "Sleeping your way up?" the supervisor had remarked coldly, the insinuation cutting deeper than Sophia wanted to admit. Diego had harbored similar suspicions initially. "Why would he create this position for you specifically?" he had questioned. "What history is there between you two that you're not telling me?" Sophia had shared the full story of that long-ago summer, downplaying her teenage crush, but emphasizing the connection between Reynolds and Roberto. Diego had listened in silence, his expression unreadable before finally nodding his acceptance. "If Papa trusts him now, I'll try to do the same," he had said. But Sophia noticed how he straightened his posture whenever Reynolds was around, how his eyes tracked their interactions with quiet intensity. As for Roberto, he had become an unlikely ally in the development process, his decades of knowledge about the neighborhood proving invaluable. The proposed community marketplace now featured elements that honored the district's cultural heritage, with Roberto's expanded grocery as its anchor. Only Jackson Reynolds remained an enigma. Professional and supportive in their work interactions, he maintained a careful distance that confused Sophia. The personal connection he had initiated that day in his office seemed deliberately muted now, replaced by a strictly business relationship. Occasionally she would catch him watching her with an unreadable expression, only for him to look away when their eyes met. Today, Reynolds had requested a private meeting in his office to discuss what he called the final piece of the project. Sophia gathered her notes and headed to the executive floor, curious and slightly apprehensive. His office was understated compared to his hotel suite, practical luxury rather than ostentatious wealth. Reynolds stood at the window, his back to the door, seemingly lost in thought. "You wanted to see me?" Sophia announced her presence. Reynolds turned, his expression serious. "Yes, thank you for coming." He gestured to a seating area rather than the formal conference table. "There's something important we need to discuss, something I should have told you from the beginning." Sophia sat, her professional composure masking growing concern. "Is there a problem with the development?" "No, the development is proceeding exactly as planned." Reynolds remained standing, unusually tense. "This is about something else, something personal." A knot formed in Sophia's stomach. "Mr. Reynolds, Jamie," he corrected softly. "Please, Jamie," she conceded. "Whatever this is, I'd appreciate directness." He nodded, finally sitting across from her. "The summer I spent in your neighborhood wasn't just about gathering information for my father. It became about escape. From the pressure, the expectations." He paused. "And from the knowledge that I wasn't actually Thomas Reynolds' biological son." Sophia blinked, surprised by this unexpected revelation. "I don't understand what this has to do with—" "My mother had a brief relationship before meeting my father," Reynolds continued. "She never told me who my biological father was, only that he wasn't aware of my existence. After she died 5 years ago, I found letters she had kept, letters that led me back to the Riverside district." A cold realization began to form in Sophia's mind. "Are you saying—" "Roberto Martinez is my biological father," Reynolds stated quietly. "I confirmed it with DNA testing last year, though I haven't told him yet." Sophia stood abruptly, the room suddenly spinning. "That's impossible. Roberto would have mentioned a relationship with Elena Reed, a woman from a different social circle who disappeared suddenly without explanation." Reynolds shook his head. "My mother told me they were young, the relationship brief but intense. When she discovered she was pregnant, her parents forced her to marry Thomas Reynolds, who agreed to raise me as his own for the right price." Sophia sank back into her chair, thoughts racing. "Diego is your half-brother," she whispered. "That makes you—" She trailed off, the implications overwhelming. "Mateo's uncle," Reynolds finished. "Family." The word hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. Sophia's mind flashed to the photograph in his hotel suite. The woman must have been his mother, Elena. And the news clipping about Roberto's fight against development 15 years ago suddenly made sense. It wasn't just research, it was personal history. "Does Diego know?" she asked finally. Reynolds shook his head. "No one knows except you. I've been trying to find the right way to tell Roberto, to tell all of you." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of vulnerability that reminded her of the boy she had once known. "I didn't plan for any of this to happen this way. When my father died last year and I took full control of the company, revisiting the Riverside development was partly business, partly a way to connect with my roots. And the position you offered me, was that because I'm your brother's wife?" The question came out sharper than intended. "No," Reynolds replied firmly. "That was because you're qualified, intelligent, and understand both worlds. The family connection is complicated but separate." Sophia stood again, needing space to process this revelation. "You should have told me from the beginning." "I know. I was afraid it would seem like manipulation, that you wouldn't believe my intentions were genuine." He looked up at her, vulnerability evident in his expression. "The development plan is real, Sophia. The desire to preserve the community is real. And so is my need to somehow be part of the family I never knew I had." Before Sophia could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from Diego. "Emergency at the store. Come quickly." "I have to go," she said, gathering her belongings with shaking hands. "Diego needs me at the store." Reynolds stood. "Sophia, please. I need time to process this," she cut him off. "And you need to tell Roberto the truth, soon." The situation at the store turned out to be less emergency and more celebration. Roberto had signed the final agreement for his place in the marketplace, and Diego had insisted on marking the occasion. When Sophia arrived, her mind still reeling from Reynolds' revelation, she found Roberto opening a bottle of champagne, while Diego proudly showed neighbors the renderings of the new store. "There she is," Roberto called warmly. "The woman who made sure our voice was heard in those corporate offices." Diego embraced her, his smile wider than she had seen in months. "The physical therapist says I can start working part-time next month," he whispered in her ear. "Things are finally turning around for us, mi amor." Sophia returned his embrace, her heart heavy with the secret she now carried. Across the store, she caught sight of a faded photograph on the wall. Roberto as a young man, his arm around Diego's mother. They looked so happy, so complete. How would this family absorb the shock of Reynolds' revelation? Later that night, after putting Mateo to bed, Sophia found Diego staring at their finances with an expression of cautious hope rather than his usual worry. "With your new salary and my partial return to work, we can start paying down the medical debt," he said. "Maybe even save for Mateo's education." Sophia sat beside him, taking his hand. "Diego, there's something I need to tell you about Jackson Reynolds." The story emerged slowly, painfully. Diego listened in stunned silence as Sophia revealed Reynolds' claim about his parentage. When she finished, he stood and walked to the window, staring out at the neighborhood that had been his family's home for generations. "It can't be true," he said finally. "Papa would have known, would have told me." "Maybe he didn't know," Sophia suggested gently. "Reynolds said his mother never told Roberto about the pregnancy." Diego turned, his expression troubled. "And you believe him? This convenient story that makes him part of our family, just as he's redeveloping our neighborhood." "I don't know what to believe," Sophia admitted, "but I think Roberto deserves to hear it directly from Reynolds." The confrontation happened the following evening, in Roberto's small apartment above the store. Reynolds had arrived alone at Sophia's insistence to face the family that might be his own. The revelation, delivered with the same quiet intensity Sophia had witnessed in his office, left Roberto pale and silent. "Eleanor Reed," the older man finally said, the name clearly awakening memories. "I loved her once, very briefly." She disappeared without a word. He studied Reynolds' face with new awareness. "You have her eyes." "I'd like a DNA test," Diego stated flatly. "Official confirmation." Reynolds nodded. "Of course, whatever you need." The weeks that followed were a delicate dance of adjustment and revelation. The DNA test confirmed Reynolds' claim, sending ripples through the tight-knit Martinez family. Roberto, after his initial shock, embraced the discovery with surprising warmth. "Life gives strange gifts sometimes," he told Sophia one evening as they watched Diego and Reynolds cautiously bonding over blueprints for the new store. "A son I never knew I had, returning to help preserve what I built for the son I raised." The development project progressed, transformed by the personal connection now driving it. Reynolds established a trust fund for Mateo's education and offered to help clear Diego's medical debt, an offer Diego initially rejected before accepting on the condition that it be structured as a loan. "Family helps family," Reynolds had said simply, "but I respect your pride." For Sophia, the most profound change came in watching Diego heal, not just physically, but emotionally. The burden of being the family's sole provider had been lifted, allowing him to focus on recovery and on reimagining his role in the family business. 6 months later, on a warm spring evening, the Martinez family gathered on the rooftop terrace of Reynolds' downtown apartment. The Riverside district sprawled below them, construction already underway on the carefully designed revitalization project. Roberto held Mateo pointing out landmarks and sharing stories, while Diego and Reynolds grilled dinner, their conversation flowing more naturally now. Sophia stood at the railing, watching the sunset paint the city in gold. Reynolds joined her, respecting the comfortable silence that had developed between them. "Thank you," he said finally. "For what?" "For giving me a chance to explain, for helping this family accept me." He glanced back at Roberto and Diego. "For completing a circle that began long before any of us knew it existed." Sophia smiled. "Family is family, complicated, messy, and ultimately worth fighting for." As they rejoined the others, Sophia marveled at life's unexpected turns. The poor girl who had cleaned hotel rooms for baby formula had found not just financial security, but an expanded family and renewed purpose. The billionaire in room 501 had found his roots and a chance to heal old wounds. And together, they were creating something that honored the past while building toward a hopeful future. Later, as they prepared to leave, Reynolds pulled Sophia aside. "I've been thinking about your background in education," he said. "The development will include a community center with educational programs. We need someone to direct it, someone who understands both the old neighborhood and the new opportunities." Sophia felt a familiar spark, the long-dormant dream of teaching, of making a difference through education. "Are you offering me another job?" Reynolds smiled. "I'm offering you a chance to fulfill the potential I saw in you 15 years ago, the teacher who never got to teach." As Diego approached with a sleeping Mateo in his arms, Sophia looked between the two half-brothers, one she had loved since childhood, the other who had reappeared in her life like a character from a story too unlikely to be fiction. The baby who had brought them together slept peacefully, unaware of the remarkable circumstances that had expanded his family and secured his future. "I'd like to hear more about this opportunity," she said, taking her son from Diego's arms and feeling, for the first time in years, that life had offered not just a solution to their struggles, but a genuine second chance. The billionaire in room 501 had indeed been her fate, but not in any way she could have imagined when she first entered his hotel suite with cleaning supplies in hand. Some connections, it seemed, were written in the stars long before we recognized them, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal themselves and change our lives forever.